Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Sebastian Trolli. I'm the head of research for industrial automation and software at Frost & Sullivan, and I'll be moderating today's session titled From Sensor to Decision, Why Response Speed is the New Competitive Advantage in Manufacturing. This session is sponsored by InfluxData. Thank you for your support. And before we get into the discussion, a few quick notes. Find the chat window and tell us where are you joining from. It helps to know who's in the room. Post all your questions in the Q&A window, not in the chat window. It makes them easier to track and far more likely to get answered. Submit your questions as we go. Sorry, don't wait till the end. We run exactly 58 minutes and we'll get you out on time. And last but not least, follow IIoT World on LinkedIn and X for event updates and session highlights. We have a warm-up question for you. Please respond that question in the chat window, not in the Q&A. What's the biggest gap between when something goes wrong on your plant floor and when your team knows about it? Is it 5 seconds? Is it 5 minutes? Is it 5 hours? Drop it in the chat window. And with that, let's focus on the session. In manufacturing, the window between a small deviation and a costly event can be measured in seconds. A vibration pattern shifts, a batch parameter drifts, a temperature profile moves outside its normal band, a line starts producing scrap before the quality system catches it. A compressor, a pump, a robot, a press, or a filling line gives an early signal that something is wrong. The problem is that many plants still make decisions based on data that has already been aggregated, delayed, stripped of resolution, or passed through too many hands-off before anyone acts. So, response speed is not only a technical issue, it is a management issue. It affects who sees a problem, who trusts the signal, who owns the next step, and how fast the organization can act without creating more risk. And today, we'll keep that discussion very practical. We will look at where the sensor-to-decision gap breaks down, how manufacturers can improve response speed in brownfield environments, what it takes to build trust in real-time data, and where this creates value beyond faster firefighting. I'm joined by 3 leaders working on this problem from very different angles. Please welcome Conrad Chuang, Industry Marketing Consultant at InfluxData. Conrad works connect modern data architecture and time series data to IIoT and manufacturing with a sharp focus on real-time operations and how the Enterprise Data Foundation supports analytics and AI. He knows where the architecture breaks down before the models ever get involved. Please welcome Jonathan Alexander, Global Manufacturing AI and Advanced Analytics Manager at Albemarle Corporation. Jonathan serves as the Global Manufacturing AI and Advanced Analytics Manager within Albemarle Corporation's Global Manufacturing Excellence Organization. He leads the global strategy and implementation of Albemarle Intelligence, an enterprise-wide initiative focused on embedding artificial intelligence, machine learning, and advanced analytics to drive improvements in OEE, yield, quality, and equipment reliability. And please welcome Felix Strenger, Thought Leader AI at Bosch Connected Industry. Felix brings almost 20 years of hands-on production experience. He worked at the intersection of lean methodologies and Industry 4.0, driving AI performance improvements across manufacturing processes and value streams at Bosch's global production network. Now, he's shaping the next act in manufacturing with the AI agents of manufacturing co-intelligence. Thank you so much, Conrad, Jonathan, and Felix. It's great to have you here. And now, let's start with the first topic of discussion. So the first topic of discussion would be where the sensor-to-decision gap breaks. And let's start with Conrad. We have the first question to Conrad. Most manufacturers will say response speed is a priority, but their data infrastructure tells us a different story. What is the real bottleneck? And who in the organization actually owns fixing it?
Well, Sebastian, I'd be very curious to hear what the other panelists say about this, but it's my feeling that we'd be very lucky if there was just a bottleneck. I think there's actually a lot of rough spots that need to be addressed. So, kind of conceptually, I think one of the first ones is really on the ITOT side. I mean, so the plants, you've got a lot of systems that were, very good at designing what they're supposed to do. Like, you've got your data historians, you've got your control systems, SCADA systems, and they're ideal for that kind of plant level visibility, the reporting, the compliance. But if you ask the systems to deliver, say, high frequency data to analytics and AI, other applications downstream, I think that's what's one of the bottlenecks. That's where the gap shows up. So, very practical question. It's like, how easy is it to get data out of the historian into the hands of the people that want to analyze it, that need to act on it? So I think that's just like the micro one. Then there's a bigger one, which I think is really scale. So if we look at like, so for some of our customers that are running like, multiple plants or fleets, constellations, it's one thing to understand what's happening on one line, but like as you think about scale, how do I get all that data consolidated, aligned, contextualized? So I think that's another bottleneck. And then there's a third bottleneck, and I think it's actually non-technical, and maybe we'll cover this in a subsequent question, but it's really about ownership and governance, right? So if your plant teams are there essentially running production, do you want them to be the ones to support the internal data platform that delivers information to everyone else, right? The answer is probably no, right? So for us, I think one of the things that we've seen is, and this kind of points back to your question about, who owns fixing these kinds of problems. Maybe there's a, federated model or like a shared operating model where different teams do different things, so maybe OT owns the data historians, those operational systems, IT owns like the platform for data delivery, and then perhaps a digital transformation team kind of drives the entire process forward for things like, OBE or predictive maintenance or, using that telemetry to kind of drive out unplanned shutdowns. But that's kind of the way we look at it. There's like a multi-bottleneck type problem, but I don't know what you guys think. Um, yeah.
Felix, Jonathan, would you like to add on Conrad's comments?
Yeah, I think I'll speak to it, and what I might do is, and maybe I'll go ahead and answer the next question because I think it does feed into Conrad's question as well. Um, and so the thing I'm thinking of is, okay, the conversation is around how do we close the sensor to decision gap. And so I think about one of the jobs that our team has is we convert data into insights and then the insights into action, and then the action has to deliver ROI. And so if you're asking yourself, where does this process go wrong? It's all of the above. It's really everywhere. And I've dedicated my career to really trying to crack this problem. And if there was one specific thing, then I wouldn't have a career out of it. So it's, on one hand, it's a very complicated problem, but that also makes it fun. Um, but I was shaped, if I tell like a personal story, I was shaped by some of my experiences in the chemical plants as a process engineer. So I remember one of our sites, we had this process supervisor. His name was Guy, and that was like his literal name. His name was Guy. And Guy had been there for 30 years, and at the time he was a superintendent, but he would get to the plant at 5 a.m. in the morning. And for 2 straight hours, he would spend looking at process trends, these little squiggly lines for our temperatures and pressures and flows. And he would have a little notebook and he would write down anything that he saw that he thought was different. Now, he'd been looking at these graphics for 15 years, maybe longer. And so he could would you say quickly, but it took him 2 hours every day. He would do that and read the shift reports. And he would then go into the control room with all the rest of the shift supervisors and foremans and operators that had done the exact same thing. So he had trained them on this process. And then they would discuss all the insights that they found in the data. And then they would discuss what actions they want to take from it. And as I sat as a young process engineer watching those, it was just so fascinating that everybody had a different opinion on interpreting the signal. And also, people found different signals during their morning routine. And then, even if you had the right interpretation, the action that you would take, uh, people felt like they had different actions they needed to take on it. And then even if you had the same action, people were looking for different results on how to measure that and where the value was. So I was had that impression as a young engineer, and that stuck with me throughout my career. And we've kind of um, focused on how do we solve that all of those little problems at scale.
Oh, that was a fantastic story, Jonathan. Thanks so much for sharing with us and the audience, of course. And I have a question for regarding this topic, right? So, of course, this webinar is titled "From Sensor to Decision: Why Response Speed is a New Competitive Advantage in Manufacturing," right? So, response speed has always been important in manufacturing, right? So, what has changed in recent years to make this factor the decisive competitive advantage today? And what role does AI play in all of this?
That's a very nice question, Sebastian, because in my eyes, it gets right to the heart of the current transformation we see. So for years, it was about the mechanical speed of production and the efficiency of production lines. But now it's more about the speed of reacting to the data. For example, in response of a quality problem or fluctuations, a mechanical failure, and so on. So, and there's where AI plays a critical role in my eyes. It can act as a powerful accelerator to turn this complex data, as Jonathan also described, into actionable insights in real time, but only if there's one precondition with it in our views. So, and this is a solid data foundation. This foundation is like, in my eyes, the single biggest lever for success, but it's also unfortunately the greatest hurdle to overcome. It's not enough to have more data and more data. You need the data with quality and context. And without this semantically enriched data, which explains the actual meaning of the value for an AI system to understand every time the same, like, for example, a temperature, is it in Celsius or in Fahrenheit? This results, if you have like this semantic enriched data, then the results will be reliable, and if you don't have it, it's unreliable, and you have a risk of making mistakes, and that costs you, of course. And that's why I believe before you can win the race for speed, for your question, you must first build this foundation of high quality data and contextualized data.
Thank you, Felix. And please, Jonathan, Conrad, if you want to share your insights on the different questions, also Felix with the other questions, please feel free to jump in, right, and make your comments and give your opinions. Sure. Thank you, Felix, for that answer. Sorry. And before wrapping up this session, I have a final question, this time for Jonathan. And again, Felix, Conrad, please feel free to jump in. Jonathan, where do teams hesitate?
I think Conrad, he looks like he wants to say something.
Oh, sorry, Conrad. Go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
I think Felix is absolutely correct in regards to context. And I think it's an iceberg-like problem. Like on the surface, Felix is like, oh, well, is this temperature in Celsius or Fahrenheit, right? And it seems like just a very tiny problem. But then you start to dig into it. And you're like, well, what is the sampling rate of the sensor? Even though the sensors are from the same manufacturer, maybe the older vintage samples or has a different resolution than the other ones, right? So there's like all these different bits and pieces for the context. And then you start to also think about things like, well, how do you address these kinds of problems? So I guess one of the things that I'm kind of curious about that you guys have seen or thought about is like, how important are some of these asset models that are in the environment to help determine what it is that we're looking at when we actually see some of this telemetry? I mean, are there kind of canonical type asset models that you guys have worked with, which would be common across, say, a particular sector, or are these almost always like bespoke? I would hate to say hand built, but sometimes I don't see any other way than hand mapping some of these things together or hand resolving some of the semantics. But that's I'm just kind of curious about what you guys have seen on the context side.
Yeah, I think for us, the semantic layer is king, and um, we have invested very, very deeply in that. Our one of the things that we use is the Aviva Pi system, and so they have a thing called the Asset Framework. It's a product that's been around for um, 15 years now, I think. But it's kind of a that semantic layer, not just to create these hierarchies of how your process and equipment kind of fit in your certain production lines or production areas, but also what it really does is enables us to scale and templatize analytics. So when you have this structure, what you can do is then you can apply kind of modules within the structure. And then you can start to, when the structure is in a certain format, you can start to script out and automate some of the downstream applications. So what we found is that we might go to a site and spend 3 to 6 months working on building this asset model, this semantic layer. But then once we've done that, we can build and deploy like a machine learning model on across hundreds of variables and 20, 30 equipment. We can build that and deploy it in under 60 minutes. And if you try to do that without that, then that process typically takes maybe 3 to 4 weeks. And so when you think about your ability to scale, that's really where I find that the semantic layer is really valuable.
Very valuable. Exactly. I have one final question to wrap up this section. I would like to open this question to all of you. Please feel free to share your insights on this. Where do you think today teams are hesitating to act? Is it lack of data? Is it lack of confidence in the data? Or the time it takes to get it into a usable, meaningful form? I mean, where do teams are really hesitating to act today, and why do you think? What do you think? Sorry, it's a main root cause for this.
I can go. I think it's actually the third one. It's the data prep problem, getting it into usable form, understanding what it actually means, understanding how I can integrate the information together. I think that's one of the bigger problems out there. I think, Jonathan, your answer is very good, right? Like you spend like the 3 to 6 months, or you spend the time period to build out the ontology, and then like everything else goes like butter, right? But you got to take the time up front. And unfortunately, I feel like it's like you got to really dig down into the details, really understand the underlying data systems, understand the what's actually being reported and what the telemetry looks like. So I think that's one of the harder problems to address. I don't know what you guys feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I feel the same way. The problem is you have to focus where to start, and I usually or I would consult any company to start in this path to come from the problem and try to solve a pain point and try to solve this problem first, and then look at the data, what data I need for it, and try to enrich this data with a semantic layer as we spoke, and then to really understand the data, and then solve this problem, because then you, with this momentum, you can go on, and the semantic layer gets bigger and bigger, and you can use it for other applications also.
Yeah, I would in somewhat agree, and then somewhat I might have a different take on it. So, like I said before, I think all of these pieces are problems, and we have had to address all of them over time. And so there is not one piece. Um, but you have to get started. And so I think that is maybe the challenge. And I'm sure probably most people on the call have started. What we find is that people kind of get stuck into this what we call pilot purgatory, or it's the dashboard graveyard where you have built all of these maybe individual use cases. You find this success, but then somehow you can't scale it. So then you start another pilot with another use case. So I'm kind of a systems guy. I have some Lean Six Sigma. I have my Six Sigma black belt, but I'm always thinking about the underlying process and system. And so we developed what we call action boards. And so what we try to do is that we don't build dashboards, we build action boards. Maybe the technology is exactly the same, but the philosophy for us is different. You don't put an insight on the action board without a corresponding action plan. And that action plan includes, how do you interpret the signal or the insight? How do you respond to it? Who responds to it? And how are you going to measure the result that you took the right action? And then what's the governance mechanism that closes that loop where people are following up on that? And I feel like when you have that system scales. And so you can put any insight into that system, and that can be more customized to whatever data source you're dealing with, but really trying to get a process for being able to take the insights, convert them into action, and convert that action into ROI. To me, that would be where I would start.
No, that's a great way. I don't know, Felix, you would like to add something, but if not, that's a great way to wrap up this first topic. Thank you, the three of you. Thanks to the three of you for sharing your very valuable insights. And before proceeding or moving into the next theme or topic of discussion, let's bring the audience into this. Let's proceed with the poll question. We have prepared a poll question for you, for the audience. So please take 30 to 45 seconds to respond. I will briefly discuss the results. So the question is, where is your organization in addressing operational data latency and response speed? Is it still identifying the problem, building awareness internally? Is it building the business case for investment? Is it actively evaluating solutions? Already in implementation, or you have solved this and looking to optimize further? So please take a few seconds to respond, and we'll analyze the results shortly. So probably would be a good time to see the results. Well, clearly there are two categories clearly leading here. One of them is still identifying the problem, building awareness internally, 43% of the respondents. And this number two is building the business case for investment, which is 28% of the respondents. So basically are the two, if we measure, let's say, maturity from 1 to 5, these are the two earliest stages, right? Number 1 and number 2. So Conrad, Jonathan, Felix, do you have any comments on these results? Does this surprise you? In my case, that doesn't surprise me at all. But I'd like to know your insights or thoughts on this.
No, it's not surprising. It's a tough. I think it's unfortunately. I think a lot of the problems in organizations are change management related. They're not technical, right? I think Jonathan pointed out. It's you build the operating model and you can generally scale, right? But that's a change management technique. It's not like, buy this database, right?
Right.
As much as I would love to be, just buy this database and everything will be fine. Yeah. That's not the case. But I don't know what do you guys think? Sorry.
No, actually the same thing. I fully agree with you that in this transformation, the most problems I see in the companies is getting the people involved right, and do the change with them and addressing and not doing. The companies always think very big or try to think very big, but then you get lost. It's too complicated. Think easy, just one. Okay, you have to think, of course, of the future and see what I want to achieve, but you have to cut it down like a salami, and just do one piece at a time, and then you get the people involved, and you can use the momentum to momentum.
Right. You said something there that I want to highlight for others is that We always say start with a pilot or start with a use case, start with one idea, start small so you can build momentum. But you mentioned something there that before you do that, you need to think big. It doesn't mean you need to start big, but you need to think big. And what I find is people don't do that first step. And so you might have heard the think big, start small, scale fast kind of framework. And so what I would do is on your thinking big is invest a lot of time into this and think about all of the different use cases that you want to solve over the next 10 years. And most people are like, well, I don't want, that's a lot of work. It sounds like I want to just like think about this month or this week or today. But if you can do that, and then you can say, maybe on a technology side, infrastructure side, how do I build the right solution to solve all these use cases? And then also you can think about the business processes to solve all those use cases, the roles and responsibilities. And once you have that kind of mapped out, you have a direction. And then the next step is to just take one step towards that direction. And then you keep taking steps and you go as fast as your organization and your resources allow. But at least you start to head towards the right direction.
Those were fantastic insights. Thank you so much, Jonathan, Felix, and Conrad for sharing them. And let's move to the next topic, which is brownfield response speed and data architecture. And I'd like to start with Conrad, if I may. Conrad, legacy OT systems weren't designed to deliver high-frequency operational data to modern analytics platforms, right? So how do you improve response speed without ripping out the existing infrastructure that the plant runs on, right?
Yeah, and I think it's good. Like, do not rip out. That would be bad because the plant depends on that stuff. I think if you look at a lot of the kind of the reference architectures that have come out as possible solutions, I think the right approach appears to be one of these like edged enterprise style where you see the data historians, you see the OT systems, but then maybe adjacent to them inside on the edge, you have a data hub, right? And that data hub acts as the point of collection for not just maybe OT, but it could be other things, other kinds of events that you want stored. And then, so you have a local hub, and that's used to support kind of like local analytics, plant analytics. But then there could also be a consolidated hub. So you talk about the scaling problem where I want to see, like in our case, we work with a lot of battery energy storage system guys. So there may be a hub locally for that particular battery stack, but then there's a consolidated one that brings all that information together so you can do cross-asset analysis. But that's what we've seen. So it's like less like let's rip and replace and more like let's try and build out a adaptation type platform first, get that stable, and then over time look at removing some of these assets. That's at least what we think. But
yeah. And that, yeah, I agree 100% with you, Conrad. That's what we heard from most of the vendors and manufacturers that we speak with at Frost & Sullivan, and it was great for us to, or for you to share this with the audience, right? So I have a question for Felix, if I may. Felix, we are talking about building a solid data foundation, right? As Conrad mentioned. So this is often a complex and lengthy project, right? So how can a company like Bosch, for instance, help a manufacturing company lay this foundation? And how do you ensure that the resulting AI decisions are not only fast, but also trustworthy and explainable?
Yeah. That's very important, yeah, and it gets we call it like industrial grade AI, yeah, and it separates, of course, the showcases from the scalable solution. And our answer to this is we build our unique identity. What I mean by this, it's as a leading manufacturer and a technology provider, we know. Where this is, what we need and what we can provide. Yeah. To the first point, how we help this to build this complex data foundation. Our key is here. We have the key advantage of Bosch organization is our deep domain knowledge. We face and we have faced all these challenges, and all over our plants we have about 200 of them in all the world with all the different value streams you can think of. And that's why we developed this Bosch semantic stack, as we call it. And it's not creating another data lake. It is more like a building a reusable digital product twin. And that provides a semantic context needed for the AI to work reliable. And with this AI, industrial LI greatness. Then we partner with the companies to help them overcome these scaling challenges, so they don't stuck in this endless piloting projects and move forward. And this is not any test project anymore. Right now we have about 7 million digital twins, product twins in the field, and so we know what we are talking about. And this is directly connects to your second point. I think this was trust. And trust is what we see is everything. You need to trust your solution, and you need and it's not coming from a black box, of course, yeah. And an AI that hallucinates, we all have seen it, and even 1% of this hallucination is often unacceptable in a shop floor environment where quality is measured like in parts per million, yeah. And therefore, the quality of the data, as I said, this data foundation is so important. And this is our philosophy in our manufacturing co-intelligence, as we call it. This means that the human is always in the loop. And we believe with this technology, the technology must support and augment but not replace the expert. For example, we have one product, it's called a shop floor AI agent, and this acts like a co-pilot. Yeah, when a line stops, for example, the agent is providing the on-site technician with a documented knowledge from the most experienced engineers to solve this problem immediately. What does it mean? The goal is to have always, independent of a shift or the hour or the day, you have always the best expert with the best knowledge helping you to solve this problem on the shop floor. And then you come to this trustworthiness. Yeah? And so let me repeat, the AI has to augment the expert and provide the insights, but the human provides the judgment. And that's how we ensure this decision is not only fast, but also trustworthy, explainable, and of course, safe at the end.
Thank you so much, Felix, for that answer. I'd like to wrap up this section with a question for Jonathan, which is very important, I guess. Jonathan, most manufacturers have already spent significant resources on digital transformation, right? Probably like you. So why does response speed still remain something really hard to achieve? And what has to change to turn existing data investments into operational action?
Yeah, I think this is the kind of golden egg that everybody is searching for, and I think all of us at one point in time, myself included, have fallen victim to shiny object syndrome. And it's very tempting, especially nowadays with AI. But what I find is that at least for a long time, the perception was these technologies is that you could just basically take the technology solution, the analytics, the dashboard, and you plug it in, you do the configuration, and you train people how to use it, and then you walk away, and then you come back and your ROI is handed to you on a silver platter. And what we found is, unfortunately, that just doesn't happen. Is you can have these great tools and maybe even a dashboard but people somehow don't always use them, and especially don't use them in the same way if they do use them. And so those dashboards become like another art piece on the wall. They become another tab in your browser. And so that's why we kind of focus on the process, the action board system. And most engineers, and we've deployed these across thousands of operators around the world, across five different continents. We've trained over 400 engineers. And when I talk to the engineers, not a single one really, or maybe there's a few exceptions, but most of them, they like building the tool. They like the technology. It's fun to be a builder. It's like, it reminds them maybe of playing with Legos, except on a computer. And so building dashboards and calculations and stuff is fun for a lot of engineers. Now, the organizational change management part, dealing with resistance, most engineers don't really like that as much, and even myself included. And so people tend to focus their time on building and they don't focus their time on the people side. And I think that's where the most of the value is. But it's also where I find it takes significantly much longer of a time investment to do that piece right to get the right value. But if you make that investment, the compounding returns that we see are incredible. And so we have sites that we've done this. I can remember early on, maybe 10 plus years ago, where we made that investment, and the teams there are still using the tools in the same way. Now 10 years later. But it took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get it that way.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much. Oh, so
Yeah,
Conrad,
we're going
to add something? Okay.
Yeah, just add one thing. I think Jonathan and Felix both absolutely correct. I think, Jonathan, your comment about the action boards, like getting to, like what is the purpose of this thing and like what action can I take from it, and also the change management issue. At least what we've observed is that it ties back to when you go through the change management exercise and you get everyone on the same page, then you have unity of effort. And when you have unity of effort, everyone can move forward together. I think the challenge is that if everyone is kind of like off in their little world, building their own little dashboard for their own little purpose, and there hasn't been a discussion, as Felix points out, about that ontology and about how this stuff intersects and about the actions you can take, if it's pretty much just for me, then you don't get that scale, right? I mean, so I know it's hard for a lot of people to get out and talk to other folks, but I think it's well worth it in the end.
Thanks, Conrad. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
Sure.
And let's move into the next section, the third one, which is trust, ownership, accountability, and action. So I have two questions here. I'd like to make these questions open. So please, Conrad, Jonathan, Felix, feel free to jump in. So the first question would be, there's an assumption that more data equals better decisions, right? So, but is there a point where the volume and velocity of operational data creates noise instead of insight? And in that case, how do leading manufacturers avoid that trap?
I guess I definitely think there are situations where the data volumes can be overwhelming if you don't. I think we've all talked about this like in various ways, right? If there's no intent to begin with, like what is the purpose of my collection of this information? Like what is the problem I'm trying to solve? What is the outcome I want to try to achieve? Then it's just more wallpaper, right? It's more pretty charts. It's, more fancy graphs. That said, I will say that we've seen the obverse, which is there are definitely situations where collecting not enough data at too low a resolution can seriously mask issues, right? So if you're dealing with situations where there's a lot of transitory events, right, or there's the system dynamics are actually a lot faster than your sampling rate, then yeah, definitely, you won't be able to see what's going on if you're not collecting that information. But I guess I think what it means is that, at least our opinion is that you want to be able to have the intent, collect all of that high resolution data. That doesn't mean everybody has to use it. It just means that it should be there. So if people do need to use it, they need to go back and check to see what happened. They have that opportunity to do so. That's kind of what we've seen. It's really about this idea of making sure that people have access to the raw information and telemetry for problem solving purposes. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I can agree on this. I see it everywhere. Companies have more and more data, but no more value is created with it. It's not proportional. But with this data, if you know, that's what I was saying before. If you know your pain point and what your value you want to create with this, what problem you want to solve with this, then you can find the right data and connect it, and then it gets you to the point. You have to understand your data. That's and everybody has to have the same understanding of the data, yeah. And also the AI agents have to understand every time the data the same way. And this is important. Then you can you use this data what you need, and you create actual the value what you're gaining for.
Thanks, Felix. Jonathan, would you like to add anything to this?
Yeah, I'm often reminded of a quote from Pat Kennedy, who's the founder of OSIsoft, and he says, "Data is one of the few assets where the more that you use it, the more valuable that it becomes," and we have found that to be true.
Absolutely, no question about it. And let me go to the next section, right, which is the last one, which is business upside and a 3 to 4 year advantage, right? So I'd like to start with Conrad here, if I may. Conrad, but again, Felix, Jonathan, please feel free to jump in. Conrad, in 3 to 5 years, which manufacturers will have pulled decisively ahead on operational response speed, and what are they doing right now that others aren't?
I would say that well, I'm sure that there are extrinsic, markers. So companies are doing well revenue-wise, they've grown their market share. So you can say, okay, well, what was the root cause of some of that? And like to think, well, it's because they did the work internally to optimize their operations and improve their processes. But so what are those organizations doing right? And it sounds like both Felix and Jonathan work for organizations that are doing it right. They're not treating it as a one-off. They're looking at it more holistically. They're looking at it as an operational capability. I love that comment that Jonathan made about don't think in what I need to do this quarter, but think about what I want to do over 10 years and then work backwards as to what I can prove. I think the comment that Felix made about treating it like salami, and it's close to lunchtime here, so I got a little hungry, but like this idea that you kind of want to stack it up, you want to build up momentum. So I think part of that is organizational in nature, right? So think about the operating model, think about it as an operational capability, think about the intent of where this thing is supposed to go. And then from there, work backwards into what does the technology look like? What do the organizational structures look like? And then what are the processes I need to put into place to make sure that we can get everyone on the same page and move forward? That's kind of what I would say.
That's a great response. Thanks, yeah. Conrad. Jonathan, Felix, would you like to comment on this? Okay, so I have one final question for this section, which is, of course, business upside and 3 to 5 year advantage. And I would like to make this question again open to the three of you. So now let's look a little bit into the future, right? So what would be, I would say, the next logical step in the evolution from sensor to decision? And once we have mastered the response speed, which is one of the main topic or the key topic in this webinar, in this session, what will be the new decisive competitive advantage in manufacturing?
Okay. I think also, yeah, what comes next? Yeah, the question. I think once we have mastered the reaction speed, as we talked about, the next frontier isn't not only about reacting faster and faster and faster. It's about more proactive adaptation and generating optimizations across the entire value stream. And this, looking ahead, the next logical step would be from the evolution sensor to decision, move from the co-intelligence I talked about to more collective intelligence. Let's call it like this. So today with the co-intelligence, as I said, we focus on augmenting the human expert with a specific context, the technician on the shop floor, the quality engineer, and so on. And the next competitive advantage would be from the scaling this intelligence across the entire ecosystem. So imagine like a factory that doesn't just respond to one disruption, but dynamically adjust or reconfigures the own processes in real time to meet, for example, a changing in demands. Or I'm talking about the entire supply chain, where one delay from one part of the world automatically triggers the adjustment in the production and schedules 1,000 miles away, seamlessly, because of this collective intelligence. I think this could be the next frontier. But first, let's master the other one.
That's perfect. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So I'd like to close this section, if I may, with Jonathan, because I would like to get the manufacturer perspective, right? So Jonathan, most of the conversation around response speed focuses on, I would say, catching failures faster, right? But the same infrastructure that detects problems can be used for process optimization, for instance, improving throughput, asset utilization, quality improvement, etc. Right? So, are manufacturers actually capturing that upside, or is real-time data mostly being used some sort of defensively?
Yeah, you remember early on, I said, think big, start small, and then scale fast. And so I think if you think big enough, you're thinking about these types of questions. How do I need to optimize my process? How do I need to improve my yield or my equipment reliability? Or how do I need to think about energy efficiency or some of our sustainability goals? And then as you work your way backwards on that, you start to build that kind of that data infrastructure. And let's assume that you start to you build that to then solve multiple use cases. And I think that's where we find a lot of what we did early on. We probably spent a year before really scaling globally, thinking through all of that opportunity. And because of that, we've been able to touch lots of different use cases across all of those different opportunities. And so the team to date has delivered over 150 million in annual savings, and that's touched optimization of the process, quality improvements, equipment reliability, OEE, you name it, because the signals are there. And so sometimes it's just organizing them and structuring them and delivering them to the right piece and to the right person at the right time. But what we found is, let's assume that we have solved that. The interesting thing has been that we have created this culture of people that see data as an asset. And because of that, they treat it like an asset. They treat it with care. And we've had corporate initiatives, but now what we're seeing is we're seeing regional teams and site level teams start to come up with their own ideas, and they're actually building on top of some of the corporate foundations and infrastructure. And so the scaling has really started to kind of compound, and so we have some pretty exciting things in the pipeline over the next few years.
That's great to hear. Thank you. Thanks so much, Jonathan. And before proceeding to the audience Q&A, I would like to finish this, let's say, moderator-led section, right, or session, with a question for the three of you. And please be concise, right? Very straightforward, because this is going to be a very practical question for the audience, considering that most of the people who respond are in the early stages of this sensor to response process, right? So the question is very simple and very practical. For a manufacturer that recognizes the response speed problem, but it is still early for them to attack that problem, right? What is the first serious move you would make in the next 3 months? Very concrete. What would you say? Conrad, Jonathan, Felix?
Yeah, I can go first. Oh, go ahead, Felix, please.
No, yeah, you can start, but I can also start. Okay, let's.
Yeah.
I start. So as I said, the biggest mistake I think is to boil the ocean, yeah, and to launch a massive multi-year data lake project without any clear business case. This is not the way to go in my eyes. So as I said, I would first focus like the first month, I'd identify one high impact pain point, and to try to solve a real business issue, and then the second month build a semantic model for this, and that you can solve this with the data, this use case with, and create a like a building block for your digital product twin. And then the last month, deploy this to your shop floor, and learn from it and demonstrate that the human is still in the loop. And the principle, I would leave it like this, and get the people on board. Yeah, there's a saying, no usage without user. So if you have a perfect system and nobody uses it, it's no value. So I would come from the pain point, and then start look at the data, solve this problem, and then go ahead.
Thank you, Felix. Conrad?
Yeah, no, pretty much the same thing. I mean, I completely agree that you do want to, I think that the phrase I often use is you want to scope to fit. You don't necessarily, you want to make sure that you get something that's meaningful, but it's not too big. It's going to prove value. But I think probably the biggest thing is that you do want to get your hands dirty, right? There's like so much you learn by actually doing the work. And as Felix would say, building the ontology or wiring in the telemetry or building the actual, say, analytics on top of the dashboard. I mean, you learn so much about that because it's always like what the documentation says and what reality has, and they're not the same. And like you don't figure that out. And plus, I think if you go back to what I was saying before about the operating model of change management, once you have something super concrete, you can then point to it and you can say, here's an example of what is possible. And we did this in 30 days, or we did this, and imagine what it could be if you had 6 months or a year, right? So it's like one of the ways to build a little bit of like internal cohesiveness and speed and momentum. So that's kind of what I think. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate that. Jonathan, would you like to add something here?
Yeah, I think it depends on your goal. How big do you want it? Where do you want this to be in 5 or 10 years? Let's say you're trying to build it, in the United States, the Empire State Building. You don't give people a bunch of hammers and nails and concrete and rebar and say, hey, come back to me in 90 days and hope that you built like a section of it. The bigger that your ambitions are, the more that upfront planning you have. So for me, for the 90 days, I would spend thinking through all of your use cases. I would map out at a high level as much as you can the technology infrastructure to support those use cases, all the different solutions that you need, maybe at a high level, the ontology, and the action plan of, okay, let's assume that these technologies work. What are you going to do to use them to deliver the ROI? And to me, I would spend the entire, it's like the old Einstein quote. If I had 60 minutes to solve a problem, I'd spend the first 55 minutes coming up with the proper question to ask. So that's what I would do.
Fantastic. That was a great contribution for the three of from the three of you. Sorry, and let's go to the questions from the audience. Fortunately, we have a bunch of questions. So while you were talking, I was selecting a few of them. So let's start with a question from Rajendra Patel. Thank you so much, Rajendra, for submitting this question. Here it says, how should manufacturers balance faster decision making with governance and accuracy, especially in critical production environments? Who would you like to take this one?
I can speak to that from a manufacturing perspective.
That would be good.
I think it depends on the criticality of the decision. And so for us, what we did is we mapped out where people are making decisions today. And then what we did is we didn't necessarily change any of those responsibilities, but we said, how do we provide the right data to help them and the insights to help them make those decisions faster? And then, so we didn't necessarily change the governing model. If you're going to do some closed loop AI to where you're going to automate something that wasn't automated before, that's a different game. And for us, we focused on what we could control and what we could scale, and that was just trying to escalate and elevate the existing work.
That's great, Jonathan. I have one final question, if I may, before wrapping up the session. This comes from Alex Gouveia. Thanks, Alex, for submitting this question. Here it says, in your view, do customers already understand the full potential of IoT, I would add data here, to create value for their business? Or is there still a lot of education and persuasion needed to show the ROI and use cases?
I think there's a lot of education needed still, or even for me, and I work in this industry daily and see a lot of companies and a lot of insights within Bosch. But sometimes if you see in other things what is even possible, like on a fair or something, then you get inspired and then you see what is possible, and that gets you thinking. And this is the education I personally need. And then I think there's work to do, still. And the companies sometimes don't know what they are sitting on which data goal they're sitting on. Yeah.
Perfect, Felix. Conrad, would you like to add something to this question
No,
from the audience?
I completely agree. I wish people understood the value of their data assets. I wish they did. I think it's clear that these two guys, organizations really get it, but and I think it's that understanding that the data is valuable, that it can be monetized or utilized to improve the organization. I think that's probably what separates the ones that outperform versus the ones just perform.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with that, Conrad, Jonathan, Felix, we are closing this session for today. For those questions, thank you all so much for submitting questions, very valuable questions. We will follow up with each of you offline. And as I said, we are right on time. So the framing for this session was direct, right? The window between when something goes wrong and when someone acts has a cost. That cost is measurable and compounds across assets and quarters, right? So what I heard today from Conrad, from Jonathan, and from Felix is that closing that gap is achievable, but only when organizations make specific choices about their data infrastructure, their operating model, and build real trust in the systems doing the work. So first of all, thank you so much, Conrad, Jonathan, and Felix, for bringing real experience and real candor to this discussion. I learned a lot from it, and I suspect you did too. Thank you again to InfluxData for sponsoring this session. Your support makes this content possible. Thank you to Lucian, Carolina, and the whole IoT World team for organizing this relevant event for the industrial community. And of course, thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us and for your questions. The next session is Brownfield to Agentic, retrofitting plants with a trust layer. I encourage you to stay. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you very much. See you next time.